Hi, I'm Rowena. At New Year's dinner, my sister stood up and mocked my stutter, right in front of everyone, and they laughed. My mother smiled like it was charming. My uncle poured wine like it was background noise. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood up. And that's when I realized they hadn't ignored me all these years. They had erased me. They edited me out of family photos, cropped me out of the will, called me mentally unstable behind my back. So I started collecting the lies, building the truth. But how do you take back your name when your own blood has already sold it? End of hook. I used to believe New Year's Eve was a time for beginnings. That night proved it was just another tradition for pretending. The dining room in my mother's house looked like a magazine spread. Copper-rimmed plates, linen napkins folded into little fans, flickering candles casting warm light across silver cutlery. It was picturesque, almost sacred. From the outside, you'd think we were the picture-perfect family. From the inside, I knew it was the same script, just with different centerpieces. I sat at the end of the table, next to the buffet, close enough to be useful, but far enough to be forgettable. Across from me was Valora, my older sister. Every hair in place, wearing a cream cashmere sweater like it was tailored to hug only her shoulders. She held the room like she always did, one glass of Prosecco away from another monologue about success and real estate. Mom hovered as usual. She touched everyone's shoulders, asked about work, complimented earrings. When she got to me, she just smiled. No words. A ghost of warmth, nothing more. Dorian, Valora's husband, sat diagonally across, quiet, polite, tapping his phone under the table between sips of wine. He gave me a nod when we made eye contact, but quickly looked away, like it might cost him something to linger too long. When Valora raised her glass for a toast, everyone followed. Even I did, hoping maybe, just maybe, this year, we could get through dinner without casualties. To family, she began, voice as honeyed as ever. To legacy, and to all the voices in this room. Well, most of them work just fine. I froze. She turned to me, smiling sweetly, and then, slowly, purposefully, she started stammering. To us, she said, contorting her face in a grotesque mimicry of my childhood stutter. Laughter burst around the table, quick, unfiltered. Even Dorian chuckled, though he didn't look up. I felt my cheeks flush, not just from embarrassment, but fury, and something deeper. Recognition. This wasn't new. This wasn't even surprising. It was just finally loud enough for everyone to hear. Maribel placed her wine glass down and said, "It's just a joke, honey. Don't be so sensitive. You know how your sister is." Valora grinned. "Maybe if we reboot her, she'll speak normal like the rest of us. Control-Alt-Delete." More laughter. Except from me. I forced a smile, the kind that felt like barbed wire pulling at the corners of my lips. My hands were trembling under the table, but I kept them still by digging my nails into my thighs. Dinner went on, roast chicken was passed. Valora told a story about her recent sale of a riverfront property. Mom beamed like her daughter had just discovered electricity. No one looked at me. No one needed to. After dessert, I slipped away to the hallway under the pretense of needing the restroom. Instead, I stood by the shelf near the staircase where the family calendar rested. It was newly printed, 12 months of curated smiles and celebrations. January, Valora and Dorian in Aspen. February, Mom and Valora at the charity gala. March, Dad's birthday, only his face and Valora's. Mine was cropped out. July, a family BBQ where I remembered standing right next to the grill. In the photo, there was only smoke. I picked it up, flipped through each month. My face, blurred, hidden, or absent. I didn't exist in this house unless I was useful or silent. When I walked back to the table, I held the calendar out to Maribel. "Why am I missing from half of these?" I asked, my voice steady. She blinked. "Oh, darling, they were just better shots. You're always so shy, you know that." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have the energy to fight someone who was committed to misunderstanding me. The clock struck midnight while Valora poured champagne. I quietly grabbed my coat from the foyer and stepped outside. The air sliced through me. Oregon winters weren't kind, but at least the cold was honest. Fireworks lit up the neighborhood. I watched red and blue explode behind silhouettes of pine trees. Somewhere nearby, kids cheered. I stood alone in the dark, hearing the laughter from inside blend with the popping sky above. Not once did the door open behind me. I whispered to no one in particular. Next year, this dinner table will not hold me hostage. The roads were half frozen, glittering faintly under the dim glare of my headlights as I made my way home. I didn't put on music. I needed the silence more than I needed a distraction. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, the imprint of Valora's voice still rattling in my chest. Her words had been deliberate, slow, cruelly calculated to amuse the rest and diminish me. Again. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a while. Snow fell in lazy flurries against the windshield. Streetlights flickered behind bare branches, and the house in front of me felt more like shelter than home. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't reach for it at first, but something inside nudged me. Call it habit. Call it a sixth sense honed by years of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was a message from Dorian. Hey, I'm sorry for what happened tonight. Can I send you something? Just listen. A voice memo followed, 37 seconds long. I stared at it for a while before hitting play. Dorian's voice came through, hesitant but unedited. Rowena, I should have said something at the table. I didn't laugh because I thought it was funny. I laughed because I was uncomfortable. Valora's done that before. She did it in front of my friends, at brunch in July. She called it row knees. I recorded it, not to mock you, but because I was shocked. Another file attached. I didn't listen right away. I just sat there, the car engine humming beneath me. When I did press play, I heard her. My sister. Laughing, mimicking me, badly, flamboyantly, while their guests howled. Not a one-off, not a slip, a pattern. Back inside, I took off my coat and noticed something in the pocket. My gift tag for the scarf I had spent days knitting for Mom. The handwriting was mine, the ink smudged slightly from when I'd checked it twice before leaving. But the tag now said, "From Valora." My breath caught. I rummaged through the paper bag where I'd placed the wrapping. Crumpled ribbon, empty box, no backup tag. I remembered Maribel unwrapping it at the dinner table and gasping, "Valora, this is exquisite. You've always had such an eye for detail." I stood in my kitchen and stared at the tile for what felt like a long time. I could almost hear Valora's laughter echoing through the walls, layered over years of just teasing and don't be so serious. The weight of it wasn't new, but for the first time, I felt it without flinching. No buffering, no softening the edges. They had all played a part in turning my life into an inside joke. Even the parts I thought were just misunderstandings, I could now see with clarity. My mind had been trained to find alternate explanations, to assign everyone the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was stressed, maybe Mom just forgot, maybe I was being overly sensitive. No, I opened my laptop and created a document, titled it "The Things They Said." Underneath, I began typing everything I could remember, the mocking phrases, the stolen gifts, the subtle exclusions. I wasn't collecting proof to convince anyone else. I was collecting memory to remind myself it had happened, that I hadn't imagined it, that the silence wasn't evidence of peace. It was the echo chamber of gaslighting. I replayed Dorian's memo, not for the content, but the tone. He hadn't tried to excuse it. He'd just told the truth. And in this family, truth was rare currency. Why was the bare minimum, honesty, treated like gold? I closed my laptop and reached for my phone again. I needed to save the files, back them up just in case. As I opened my cloud drive, a folder caught my attention. Not one I had created. Private Valora. I hesitated. My pulse rose slightly, not out of fear, but anticipation. Inside that folder was something I never expected. And it wasn't just about me. The folder wasn't hidden, not really. It just sat there in the cloud, like a forgotten drawer you never thought to open, until someone tells you there's a weapon inside. Private, Valora. I clicked before I could second-guess myself. Inside were dozens of media files, some dated back years. The file names weren't just organized, they were titled like jokes. Robot 2018 Move. Glitch Queen WAV. Another one. Control-Alt-Delete. Thanksgiving. I stared at the thumbnails. My hands began to shake before I even pressed play. The stills showed me in various moments. Half-talking, blinking, caught mid-expression. My mouth open, but no sound coming out. Always edited that way. Always frozen on the part where I looked most broken. I opened one file at random, a brunch from last year. I recognized the location, the backyard of Valora's friend in Bend. Valora was at the head of the table, mimicking my stutter. Spa! Spit it out, Ro, she laughed, waving a mimosa like it was a microphone. Her audience of 4, 3 women and 1 guy I didn't recognize, erupted. Someone recorded it. It was edited with captions, reaction clips, and posted under a burner account I didn't even know she had. Views? Over 500,000. The comments were worse than the video. OMG, she sounds like Siri having a seizure. Is this real or acted? Either way, dead. That's her sister? Yikes. I didn't cry. I downloaded it, saved it into a new folder titled Exhibits. Clicking back, I found another folder labeled Family Album Archive. I opened it. Inside were digital copies of printed family albums from the last 20 years. The earlier ones were intact, up until around when I turned 12. After that, my presence faded. Photos from birthdays, Thanksgivings, beach trips, my face was missing or blurred. In one picture, a group shot on the 4th of July, I remembered standing right next to the grill. In the edited version, there was only smoke where I'd been. A birthday photo hit hardest. I was turning 14. The cake read, "Happy Birthday, Rowena," but I had been cropped out. Just the cake, the gifts, and Valora in the frame, holding a knife mid-slice. The caption read, "Best birthday ever." I felt something unravel inside me. Not just sadness, not even anger. It was recognition. This wasn't just neglect. It was a campaign. My chest tightened as I remembered another moment. A dinner in high school. I'd written a poem for Dad's retirement. I stood up to read it aloud, nervous but proud. Halfway through, I hit a block. The words stuck. Valora laughed and said, "Let's just read it for her so we're not here all night." More laughter. Maribel didn't say anything. She poured herself another glass of wine and looked at the ceiling. Now, years later, watching the footage, clicking through the photos, I realized they hadn't simply ignored me. They'd deliberately erased me. I hadn't just been left out. I'd been replaced. Edited out of my own family. I didn't feel like screaming. I felt sharp, cold, clear. I started downloading everything, every video, every edited photo, every file name. I renamed the files by date, tagged each one as evidence. I wasn't saving this because I needed revenge. I was building a record, my own archive. "They'll never call me dramatic again," I whispered. "This time, I'll let the facts speak." I leaned back, closed my eyes for a moment, then opened my phone. I wanted to make sure the voice memo from Dorian was safe too. That's when another notification popped up. A message from Dorian. It was a screenshot. The preview showed the name of a group chat, Family PR. And the first line read, "Don't worry, if she speaks up, we'll spin it like..." Whatever they planned to spin, I wasn't going to let them finish the sentence. The screen on my phone hadn't gone dark yet. I stared at the message preview longer than I needed to. "Don't worry, if she speaks up, we'll spin it like..." Spin what? What truth had they already decided needed reframing? I tapped to open the full screenshot Dorian had sent me. The group chat was called Family PR. How fitting. The participants, Valora, Maribel, and our cousin Trina. Trina had written, "She's clearly unraveling. Maybe we can guide the narrative a bit? Say it's stress from her job?" Maribel's response, "Always so fragile, our Rowena. She needs something to keep her grounded." Then Valora, ever the star of her own performance, wrote, "Rowena was a glitch in this family's software, a misfire we never debugged." Maribel responded with a string of laughing emojis. That part gutted me more than I expected. I could have predicted Valora's cruelty. She'd always been theatrical in her contempt. But Mom, that confirmed it. I wasn't the quiet daughter. I was the tolerated one. That line from Valora stirred something buried deep. Not just rage, but memory. Junior year, a family barbecue. I dropped a tray of drinks because my hands were shaking. Crowds always did that to me. Valora leaned in and whispered, "You were a mistake, you know that, right?" Then louder, for others to hear, "Oops! Glitch again!" I had laughed it off back then, told myself she didn't mean it. That's what siblings did, right? Wrong. This wasn't teenage cruelty. This was architecture, systematic. As if the message thread wasn't enough, Dorian sent a second file. "You need to see this too," he wrote. It was a short video. Familiar music played softly over grainy footage of me hugging Maribel. My arms were around her, her hand on my back. The caption on Facebook read, "Mothers always try their best, even when kids don't understand." What the public didn't know was that this moment came after I had a panic attack in her kitchen, after Valora had mocked my stutter again during a private dinner, and I broke down. That hug had been quiet, tender, real. Or so I thought. Now I saw it from a different angle, literally. Someone had filmed us from across the room. It wasn't comfort, it was content. How long had they been documenting me like a problem to be managed? I sat down on my couch, pulled a throw blanket over my lap, even though I wasn't cold. I began sorting through memories like crime scene photos, picking apart every word, every smile, every pause. Was that ever real? Was any of it? I thought of Maribel kissing my forehead after my college graduation and saying, "You made us proud today." But no one came to my thesis presentation. I thought of Valora bringing me soup when I was sick last winter. But now I wondered, was it genuine or a guilt offering after another private betrayal? Gaslighting doesn't just make you doubt your emotions. It makes you rewrite your entire past. I wasn't going to keep rewriting for them. I opened a new browser tab, created a private Google Drive labeled for legal review only, and started uploading the files. Voice memos, photos, videos. I didn't even know yet what I planned to do with them, but I knew I needed them somewhere they couldn't vanish, somewhere I controlled. Then I sent Valora a single text. "You might want to check your backup folders." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. The message wasn't a threat. It was a notification. The quiet ones always give warnings. You just never hear them until it's too late. My phone buzzed again. Incoming call, Maribel. I didn't move. Let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I tapped Enable on my call recording app. Sat back, watched the screen. If she was calling to clean up the mess, she was already too late. The call went to voicemail. I knew it would. I watched the name Maribel fade from the screen and waited for the message notification to appear. It didn't take long. "Sweetheart," her voice dripped through the speaker like syrup over something spoiled. "Let's not make a big deal out of this. It's just family stuff. No need to twist things. Let's keep this peaceful." Peaceful. That word had been weaponized so often in my life, it felt like a slap. In our house, peace meant shutting up. Peace meant ignoring bruises beneath polite smiles. Peace meant my silence. And silence had bought them everything. The next morning, her text arrived at 6:45 a.m., as if I were still on their clock. "Breakfast at Tilly's, 9 sharp. Just us girls. Let's make things right." Tilly's diner had been my dad's favorite. That alone made me suspicious. When I walked in, the smell of bacon hit first. The clatter of silverware and small-town gossip filled the air. But it wasn't just us girls. Valora was already seated in a corner booth, flawless in beige cashmere again. Uncle Charles sat beside her, shuffling some paperwork like a bored notary. Maribel waved at me with the kind of enthusiasm people reserve for grandkids or donors. "Sit, Rowena," she said. "We ordered coffee." I didn't. I stayed standing. "Why are there contracts on the table?" Valora folded her hands like she was on a panel. "It's just a standard consolidation agreement. Cleaner for taxes, simpler for estate records." I tilted my head. "You want me to sign away my part of Dad's property?" "It's not like you live here," Maribel chimed in, smiling too widely. "It's what your father would have wanted. Less mess." My jaw tightened. "You want less mess, but you're handing me legal papers over waffles?" Uncle Charles cleared his throat. "Let's not make this emotional." I pulled my phone from my bag, tapped open a PDF. "These are hospital visit logs," I said. "Every appointment I took Dad to during his last year. My name, my signature, me, not Valora, not you." The silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before it. Valora glanced at Charles, then Maribel, and back at the stack of papers. I didn't sit down. "I'm not signing anything today," I said, voice even. "I'll have someone review this." Maribel's expression darkened. "Rowena, don't do this to your sister." "She's done enough to me," I answered. "Now I do for me." I turned and walked out. The sun had finally broken through the clouds outside. I took a breath that didn't feel stolen. That evening, I poured a glass of water, sat at my desk, and titled a new email "Documentation Request." I CC'd Dorian and Dad's old estate attorney. The body of the message was straightforward. "Please provide full copies of the original trust documents and any proposed amendments signed after January 2021. I will respond through counsel moving forward." Then I started a new folder on my desktop. Inheritance Dispute, Gideon Files. I filled it with the visit logs, the photos, the audio clips, the screenshots, and the TikTok videos Valora never thought I'd find. I organized everything by date, relevance, and source. The reply came quicker than I expected. 2 words. "Game on." Valora had never been one for subtlety. I read the message, smiled to myself, and whispered into the quiet room, "Then let's play." By the time the sun cut through the slats of my living room blinds, I'd already been awake for hours. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, but the taste hardly mattered. My focus was on the laptop glowing in front of me. Folder tabs open, each one growing heavier, with what I now called by their rightful names. Evidence. Medical. Property. Public mockery. Fraud. They built a narrative in whispers. I was responding in writing. As I combed through cloud backups, a file name caught my eye. Buried deep, synced months ago, from an account that wasn't mine. Subject. Quiet ownership transfer. Draft language for mom's sign-off. Attached. A draft letter authored by Valora's assistant. It was addressed to Maribel, requesting she affirm, after the fact, that Valora had full authority to assume control of our father's property. The timestamp? 1 week before Gideon entered hospice care. I clicked print. The words blurred at the edges, not because of tears, but because I was staring too hard. That document wasn't just shady, it was premeditated. They didn't even wait for him to die. I uploaded it to the property folder, then cross-tagged it under intent. Less than an hour later, my phone vibrated with a series of notifications. My stomach dropped, not from dread, but recognition. Something had broken containment. The TikTok resurfaced, the one of Valora mocking my voice, mimicking the stutter, the eye ticks, even the pauses I'd learned to shorten over years of therapy. It was public now. I hadn't posted it, but someone had. And people were watching. "Wait, this is your sister?" one comment read. "She posted this, and she's a real estate exec?" Another. A third video popped up on my For You page, stitched by a disability advocate. Her tone wasn't angry, it was cold. "This isn't humor. This is targeted cruelty. This is what ableism looks like when it wears pearls." The views kept climbing. I didn't repost. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Valora called within the hour. Her voice was tight with panic. You leaked it, didn't you? You're trying to destroy me. I was on my balcony, sun warming the tops of my knees, coffee gone cold beside me. I didn't flinch. Valora, I said, if people are reacting badly, maybe the problem wasn't the audience. She hung up. I recorded the call, labeled it aggressive retaliation. Later that day, I heard back from Dad's former estate attorney. I had asked for metadata on the final copy of his will. What I got back stopped me mid-scroll. Signature date, 3 weeks after Gideon had been declared medically incompetent. Notarized by someone who had since left the firm. I cross-checked names. The notary was now working for a mortgage startup out of state. I flagged it, attached a note. Red flag, possible will tampering. I opened the fraud subfolder. The legal weight of that word had finally shifted from accusation to action. What they had done was no longer about family. It was a matter of legality, maybe even prosecution. By nightfall, my digital archive had grown from a handful of documents to a timeline of corruption. Then came the email. No subject line, just a preview. You don't know me, but I used to work for your sister. I have documents she paid me to destroy. The attachment was named Scan 01 TDF. I clicked. And with that click, I crossed into something far bigger than family politics. The file opened with a crackle. An old scan, poorly lit, slightly skewed. Gideon Family Trust, initial draft, was typed at the top in blocky serif font. The date hit me harder than anything in the document. 8 months before Dad's health took a turn. 4 months before the version they handed me to sign. 2 months before Valora ever mentioned consolidating anything. The message attached was brief. She had me destroy the originals. I saved this one. No name, no return address. But enough truth to knock the breath out of me. I set the laptop down and went for my journal. The one I hadn't opened in years. Tucked between pages was an entry from when I was 22. The handwriting shaky, rushed. A different kind of silence recorded here. I lied for Valora again today. She cried, said she couldn't handle another disappointment, told me to say it was mine. I did. Dad wouldn't look at me. Mom called me careless. I remembered it now, clearer than ever. She'd been 2 months into a pregnancy. A mistake, she called it. A weakness, I called it, until she made it mine. I took the fall. Let them believe it was my shame to carry. And they let me carry it, eagerly. She weaponized my silence. Now she was doing it again, but with deeds, not secrets. I opened both versions of the trust side by side, hers and the one I'd just received from the anonymous source. The signatures didn't match. The witnesses were different. I uploaded them into an online validation tool. Metadata aligned with a window when Gideon was already under hospital-administered medication, declared unfit for legal decisions. This wasn't sloppy. This was calculated. By noon, a knock came at the door. A courier in a blazer, far too polished for the casual errand, handed me a thick envelope. Rowena Gideon, he said, confirming my name like I might deny it. Then he left. Inside, a cease and desist letter. Valora's lawyer was claiming libel. I read it twice, set it aside, and laughed. Short, dry, full of resolve. I opened Dropbox, created a new public link, and uploaded 47 files labeled Factual Basis for Rebuttal. Then I replied to the attorney's email with one line. I'm not libeling her, I'm archiving her. That night, an old message pinged into my inbox from a name I hadn't seen since high school, Jill Myers. Hi, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I've been following what's happening. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't know Valora told people you had mental health issues. That's why we all pulled away. I believed her. My mouth went dry. Not from shock, more like confirmation. My loneliness hadn't been accidental. It had been curated. I sat on my front porch, scrolling through that message, rereading the phrases again and again. She told people I was unstable. That's why I didn't get calls back. That's why my prom date ghosted me. That's why I had to sit alone at our senior reunion. This wasn't about a house anymore, or money, or even Dad's trust. This was about control, about Valora being the only voice anyone believed. Until now. 3 days later, an envelope came through certified mail. Inside was an invitation. Family Legacy Brunch, celebrating 40 years of Gideon & Co. Valora's name was printed in bold, keynote speaker. There was a handwritten note from Maribel stapled inside. "We'd love to see you there. Let's move forward." Move forward? I RSVP'd through email. Attending. Please reserve 10 minutes at the end. I have something to show. If they thought they could celebrate legacy without facing truth, they'd learn otherwise. The building was all glass and steel, modernized since my childhood, but the brass plaque out front still read Eugene Historical Society. Inside, the event hall was dressed in velvet and nostalgia. Huge black and white portraits of my father lined the walls. Gideon shaking hands, Gideon cutting ribbons, Gideon holding babies at community fairs. Not a single photo included me. Valora stood near the front, grinning like she'd never had a bad day. She greeted guests in a sleek cream suit, the picture of polished grief. Watching her play gracious hostess while I clenched the flash drive in my coat pocket felt like watching a stage play written by a coward. It's funny, I thought, how legacy always favors the loudest one in the room. I took a seat near the back. No one acknowledged me, but I caught a few glances from cousins who used to skip me in the family text chain. I didn't care. They'd remember today. A tribute video started. Stock piano music, over-filtered clips of Dad fishing, walking through construction sites, giving speeches. Then came the interview clip, the one he gave from hospice. Except it wasn't the full version. I leaned forward, squinting, the part where he talked about the quiet one who carried everything without praise. Gone. Cleanly excised. I stood. Valora had just walked to the podium to deliver her vision for Gideon & Co. I walked up the side aisle, calm, sure. I stopped halfway between her and the projector. "Before we move forward," I said, voice louder than expected, "I'd like to share something Dad recorded." Valora blinked. Maribel reached out, as if to hush me. I didn't stop. I handed the flash drive to the AV technician. "Play it from the folder titled Unedited. It's dated 3 weeks before Dad passed." The room dimmed again. The screen flickered. There was Dad, thinner, grayer, but sharper than he'd looked in months. "I don't know how much time I have," he said on the screen, "but I know one thing. The person who carried me, quietly, consistently, without applause, is the only one who should carry my name forward." Murmurs filled the room. Valora didn't move. Her smile didn't crack, but her jaw did. When the lights came back up, no one clapped. No one needed to. The silence was better. "That was always meant to be seen," I said softly. I walked back to my seat. Maribel stood, opened her mouth, and closed it again. She sat down. After the video, people started shifting. One of my older cousins, Jonah, approached me near the coffee station. "You were the one who got him to the ER that night, weren't you? The heart thing?" he asked. I nodded. "Valora said it was her." I just looked at him. He nodded slowly. "I believe you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. The event wrapped with a limp closing statement from Valora and scattered applause. As I reached for my coat, my phone buzzed. It was Dorian. "She's already drafting a press release," his text read. "Spin incoming." I typed back, "Let her. I have the rest of the recordings." I thought showing the truth would be enough. I didn't expect them to double down on the lie. The Monday after the brunch, I woke up to pings. Not alarm clocks, headlines. Local news sites, neighborhood forums, even a couple of LinkedIn status updates were talking. Most used safe language. Family legacy challenged? Tribute interrupted by hidden truth. But some posts hit harder. Who is Rowena Gideon? Gideon's forgotten daughter speaks up after years of silence. Not all the voices were kind. Some said I was bitter, jealous, making trouble where there had been peace. But I didn't need them to defend me. I just needed them to see the lie. People weren't protecting Valora anymore. They were interrogating the story. Around noon, a letter arrived in the mail. Real paper. A return address from a town I hadn't visited in 15 years. Inside was a handwritten note on college-ruled paper. I recognized the cursive before I saw the name at the bottom, Jenna Hartley. We used to walk home together every day in 10th grade. Then she disappeared, no explanation. Her letter began plainly. I need to apologize. She wrote that her mother told her to stay away from me, that Valora had whispered I had episodes, that I'd been institutionalized. I remembered believing I was just uncool. Now I knew. I hadn't been rejected. I'd been exiled. I thought about prom, sitting in a corner while others danced. I thought about birthday parties I hadn't been invited to. All the excuses made for others, the silence I swallowed to make it through. I read her last line 3 times. I should have asked you. I'm sorry I didn't. Later that night, Dorian called. Just past midnight, his name lit up on my screen. I know it's late, he said, voice heavy. She's spiraling. The brunch didn't go her way. She's trying to spin the press release, but it's not landing. Let me guess, I said. Damage control? She thinks she's losing control. She is. Dorian paused. I always knew something was off. I saw the way she spoke to you, but I didn't want to rock the family boat. You didn't rock the boat, Dorian, I said. You let it drift off course while I bailed water alone. Silence. What do you want me to do now? Nothing, I said. This is mine now. That morning, I pulled out a binder, one of those thick 3-inch ones with reinforced rings. I printed every document, every screenshot, every video still, and slid each into a plastic sleeve. I labeled the spine with a Sharpie, Truth Archive. This wasn't for court. It was for history. As I slid in the final document, I spoke aloud to no one. You don't get to write me out of the will, the album, or the story. A few days later, while sorting through boxes from my old closet, I found a sealed envelope labeled in Maribel's handwriting. Medical. I didn't remember ever opening it. Inside was a form from the local hospital dated when I was 8. A referral for a speech evaluation. Reason listed. Observed delay, social withdrawal, possible developmental concerns. I stared at it for a long time. No one had ever explained that appointment to me. I thought I was going for a flu shot. Even my childhood had been quietly rewritten. They called it love, I whispered, but it was containment. And then, as if the universe needed punctuation, an email arrived. Subject line, Family Mediation, Thursday at 11:30 a.m. It was from Maribel's lawyer. I circled the date on my calendar in red ink and muttered, let's see if they bring lawyers or mirrors. And if they only bring mirrors, I hope they can stand what they see. I clipped the final document into the binder just before sunrise. The air inside my home was still, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. But this time, the storm was mine. My hands moved calmly now, steady over tabs labeled assets and abuse. They wanted a legacy without truth. I was bringing both. No lipstick, no perfume. My clothes weren't there to impress, just a navy blouse, slacks, and the clearest mind I'd had in years. The weight of everything I carried wasn't visible on my face anymore. That, I'd learned, was a different kind of armor. The law firm was tucked in downtown Eugene, its modern glass front masking the conflict inside. The mediation room sat behind frosted doors, neutral walls, a round table, too many chairs. It smelled like stale professionalism and burnt coffee. Maribel arrived first, sunglasses on indoors, her mouth pinched tight like she'd bitten into something she couldn't swallow. Valora walked in next, flanked by 2 attorneys in gray suits, her expression unreadable. I walked in last, alone, but not empty-handed. I placed 2 binders on the table, side by side. Thank you for coming, The mediator began, her voice artificially warm. Let's begin by identifying what's on the table. I'll start, I said, opening the first binder. This one is titled Assets. This one, I tapped the other, is labeled Abuse. The room shifted. Even the mediator paused. I'd like to play a message, I continued. It's from Gideon, dated 3 weeks before his passing. Valora's lawyer objected. The mediator raised a hand. Let's hear it. I tapped play on the audio file. Dad's voice filled the room, thinner than I remembered, but still unmistakably his. I'm sorry I let them mute you, he said. You were always the reason I believed in second chances. Silence fell. Valora's attorney looked at his notes, suddenly very interested in the fine print. Maribel didn't move. I also have a letter, I said, holding it up, from Gideon's best friend. He couldn't be here, but he asked me to read this aloud. I unfolded it slowly. Gideon once told me, I read, if Rowena ever walks out, that house will never be home again. Maribel flinched. For the first time since I arrived, she looked down. I'm not here to relitigate property, I said, voice clear. I'm here because I've spent 30 years being framed as the quiet one, the one who must be managed. But silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. Valora leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. I reject the settlement offer, I continued, not because it's not enough money, but because you're trying to pay for my disappearance. I slid a single-page document across the table. I want a public statement, I said, a correction to the family record, signed by Maribel, published in the same press channels that celebrated this false legacy. Valora snorted softly. You think anyone will care? I think the truth ages better than spin, I replied. And I'm not asking. The mediator turned to Maribel. Would you like time to consider, Ms. Maribel? She hesitated, then whispered. We'll see. I didn't blink. I already did. As I gathered my things, my phone vibrated. I glanced down. A subject line stared back at me like a flag in the wind. Final asset freeze notice, Valora Gideon. You can erase people, but sometimes the system remembers before the family does. When I stepped outside the law firm, the air stung more than usual. It wasn't just cold. It was sharp, like the kind of wind that dares you to feel proud and punished at the same time. I stood there for a moment, binder still in hand, the courthouse doors clicking shut behind me. I watched Valora get into a black car without once turning to look at me. They heard me, I thought. That doesn't mean they listened, but I spoke anyway. Over the next few days, silence filled the space where noise used to live. Then, bit by bit, it broke. One cousin sent a message that said, I didn't know, I'm sorry. Another mailed a postcard from Bend with just 2 words scribbled at the bottom. We failed you. It wasn't comfort, it wasn't penance, but it was honest. Maribel sent flowers, white lilies, with a typed note, You are not forgotten. I didn't reply, not because I wanted revenge, but because clarity doesn't leave room for confusion. Then came the dog. Mrs. Lafferty from next door stopped me at the mailbox. You know, I heard Valora gave your dad's dog to one of her clients, that golden retriever of his? My chest tightened. I drove to the local shelter that afternoon, asked the receptionist if a male retriever had been brought in within the last 2 weeks. She tapped a few keys, looked up, and nodded. Surrendered under the name Elaine Harper. I felt my throat close. That was Valora's assistant. He was curled in the back kennel, older now, but his tail still wagged when I said his name. I brought him home without making a scene. There was no need. They tried to erase my last living connection to him, I thought, as I watched him settle into the same bed he used to sleep in by Dad's chair. The next morning, I visited Gideon's grave. It was overcast, the sky too tired to rain. I brought one thing, a laminated photo of the 2 of us hiking Crater Lake, long before any of this had broken apart. One of the few pictures Valora hadn't cropped or doctored. We looked sweaty, sunburned, happy, real. You weren't perfect, I whispered, placing it on the stone. But you knew I was real. Back at home, I finalized the legal paperwork. I didn't want the full claim anymore. I wanted part of it, and a condition. Attached to the trust was an open letter. It read, "Inheritance isn't always money. Sometimes it's pain. Sometimes it's history someone else has tried to delete. I won't pass that down. Not to my children, not to my name. Let this be the last time silence is signed into a legacy." I signed my full name, every syllable, without stutter, without pause. A week passed. I worked. I took the dog on long walks. I didn't speak to Valora. I didn't need to. Then, walking away from the courthouse after submitting the final copy, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message. "I was part of what they did to you, but I've kept records too. Would you like to see them?" Truth always has a trail, and someone else just lit another match. I didn't hesitate. I replied to the message with one line. "Yes. Show me everything." Within minutes, a folder landed in my inbox, encrypted but familiar. Inside, staff contracts, scanned NDAs, emails with subject lines like sensitive training, and controlled narrative assets. One clause stopped me cold. Confidentiality preserves stability. Silence is our strongest investment. It wasn't just strategy, it was culture. I forwarded the files to my attorney with the subject, "Urgent, Supplemental Discovery." Then I opened the county filing portal and submitted a motion to freeze Valora's trust assets under suspected fraud and coercion. Attached were 2 sworn affidavits from former household staff, the same people who once brought her tea and turned a blind eye to what she turned into policy. 48 hours later, it was done. Accounts frozen, access denied. The local paper caught wind. Headline: Powerhouse heiress investigated for inheritance coercion. I didn't smile. Not really. But something inside me unclenched. 2 days after that, I noticed Gideon & Co.'s website had quietly removed Valora's biography. No explanation. Just gone. Like she'd never been listed at all. A journalist I didn't know called me that afternoon. "Do you want to tell your side now?" he asked. I paused, then said, "I never lost my voice. I was just busy sharpening it." The article came out 3 days later. It didn't make me a hero. It didn't make her a villain. But it did what mattered. It made me visible. Maribel didn't call. She left a voicemail. "Why would you destroy your sister like this?" I saved it. Named the file, still blaming the wrong daughter. In the quiet that followed, memories played like a montage. Not of pain, but of clarity. Every dismissed moment, every cropped photo, every seat I was asked to give up just this once. They weren't just betrayals. They were bricks. And now I knew what they'd been building. The last letter from Dad had been sitting on my bookshelf, unopened, for months. I read it that night. If you're reading this, it means you chose not to disappear. And for that, I'm finally proud of something. I folded it gently and slid it into the back of the binder, labeled Done. Then I packed a weekend bag, drove 3 hours to Crater Lake, and walked the same trail Dad and I hiked once when I was 13. It was colder now, quieter. I stood where we'd once taken a photo, the one with our shadows long across the rocks. That was the moment I first believed I belonged to something. Now I belonged to myself. 2 months later, I bought a small parcel of land near the trailhead. Just enough space for 5 cabins, a communal kitchen, and a library filled with books by women who'd once been silenced. I named it The Clearing. At the entrance stood a simple plaque. "This place is for the ones who spoke, even when their voice trembled." There won't be a next chapter, not because the story ended, but because I finally began.